The day we buried my husband, Robert Coleman, I thought the worst pain I'd feel was losing him. I was wrong. As I stood beside his casket, holding my granddaughter Sophie's small hand, she suddenly pointed across the cemetery, her tiny finger trembling. "There," she whispered. "That's the lady Grandpa used to visit when you weren't home." My heart stopped. I followed her gaze and saw a woman I had never seen before, standing still, watching us. And when our eyes met, she didn't look surprised. She looked like she'd been waiting. If you've ever thought you truly knew someone, tell me, have you ever been proven wrong in the most painful way? Like this story, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below, because what I uncovered after that moment changed everything I believed about my marriage. I didn't remember how the rest of the funeral ended. People hugged me. Voices murmured soft condolences. Someone pressed a tissue into my hand at some point, and I realized I had been crying without even noticing. But all of it felt distant, like I was underwater, hearing everything through a heavy, muffled silence. Because all I could hear over and over again was Sophie's voice. "That's the lady Grandpa used to visit when you weren't home." I tightened my grip on her hand as if she might slip away too. "Sophie," I whispered, bending slightly toward her. "What did you mean by that, sweetheart?" She looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes, the kind that didn't know how to lie yet. "Grandpa took me there once," she said simply. "He said it was our little secret." My breath caught. A secret, I repeated, my voice thinner than I intended. "Where was this?" She frowned, thinking. "I don't know the name." But there were stairs, and a blue door, and a lady who made cookies. A blue door, a woman, cookies. Details so ordinary they felt almost cruel. Before I could ask anything else, someone approached us, my son, Michael. "Mom," he said, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. "They're getting ready for the final prayer." I looked at him, searching his face. He looked tired, red-eyed, grieving, but there was something else too, something guarded. "Michael," I said quietly, "did you see her?" His brows furrowed. "See who?" I hesitated, then nodded slightly toward where the woman had been standing. But when we both turned, she was gone. Just gone. Like she had never been there at all. "I don't see anyone," Michael said, glancing around. "Mom, you should sit down. You've been on your feet all day." "No," I said a little too quickly. "There was a woman. Sophie saw her too." Michael's gaze shifted to Sophie. "What woman?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "The cookie lady," Sophie said, as if it were obvious. For a split second, just a split second, I saw something flicker across Michael's face. Recognition. Then it disappeared. "I think she's confused," he said too quickly. "Kids imagine things, Mom." "She doesn't imagine things like that," I snapped, sharper than I meant to. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, stepped in gently. "Danielle, honey, it's been a long day. Sophie's probably mixing up memories, maybe from a TV show or something." I stared at her. Rachel was always composed, always calm, the kind of woman who knew exactly what to say to smooth things over. But right now, her smile felt rehearsed, too perfect, too quick. "No," I said slowly, my voice steadier now. "She's not confused." Sophie squeezed my hand again. "I'm not Grandma." I knelt down in front of her, ignoring the curious glances from nearby relatives. "When did Grandpa take you there?" I asked softly. She tilted her head. "A while ago, when Mommy was busy. Grandpa said we were helping someone." Helping someone. I swallowed hard. What kind of help she was, sad, Sophie said. And the boy was too. "A boy," I echoed. She nodded. "He had a toy car. Grandpa fixed it." I closed my eyes for a second. Robert had always been good with his hands, fixing things, building things, taking care of people. But this didn't feel like kindness. It felt like something hidden, something deliberate. "Sophie," Rachel said gently, stepping forward, "why don't you go sit with Aunt Linda for a bit?" Sophie hesitated, looking at me. "It's okay," I said, forcing a small smile. "Go ahead, sweetheart." She nodded and walked off, her little black dress swaying with each step. The moment she was out of earshot, I stood up slowly. "Michael," I said, my voice low, controlled. "I need you to tell me the truth. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Mom not here. Then when I demanded quietly, because I just buried my husband and now I find out he was taking my granddaughter to visit some woman behind my back, Danielle Rachel said softly. Please, this isn't the time. No, I cut her off, my voice trembling now. It is the time, because I deserve to know what kind of life my husband was living when I wasn't looking. Michael looked away. That was the moment I knew. He knew something. You knew about this, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He didn't answer. Michael, I said again, my voice breaking, did you know? He closed his eyes for a second, then he nodded, just once, and it shattered something inside me. How long, I whispered. A few years, he admitted quietly. A few years. I took a step back as if the ground beneath me had shifted. You let me live in that house, I said, my voice barely audible, sleep next to him every night while he was sneaking off to another woman. It's not what you think, Michael said quickly. Then what is it, I demanded. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Rachel stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. Michael, she said under her breath. He shook his head slightly as if warning her not to speak. That silent exchange didn't go unnoticed. You're both hiding something. I said, my chest tightening. From me. No, Rachel said gently. We're trying to protect you. Protect me from what I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep it down. The truth, Michael looked at me, then really looked at me. And for the first time that day, I saw fear in his eyes. Not grief, fear. Dad didn't want you to know, he said quietly. The words hit harder than anything else. He didn't want me to know, I repeated. Michael nodded. He made me promise. I laughed, then a hollow, broken sound that didn't feel like it came from me. Of course he did, I said bitterly, because why would he trust his own wife with the truth? Mom, please. Michael started. No, I said, holding up a hand. Don't. I turned away from them, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about Robert, was unraveling in front of me. And the worst part? He wasn't here to explain any of it. I looked back toward the cemetery gates, half expecting to see the mysterious woman again, but she was gone. And somehow that made everything worse, because now I had questions. Too many questions, and no answers. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. Not ever. That night, the house felt colder than it ever had before. Not physically. No, the thermostat still hummed softly in the hallway, set exactly where Robert always liked it, but emotionally. The warmth that once filled every corner of our home seemed to have vanished the moment we lowered his casket into the ground. Or maybe it had been gone for longer than I realized. I sat alone at the kitchen table long after everyone had left. The casserole dishes were stacked neatly on the counter, half-eaten, covered in foil. Rachel had insisted on cleaning up, moving through the house with that same calm efficiency she always had. Michael had stayed quiet, barely looking at me as if eye contact itself might force him to say something he wasn't ready to admit. And Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching the small stuffed bear Robert had given her last Christmas. I watched her for a long moment before turning away, because every time I looked at her, I heard those words again. The lady Grandpa used to visit. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. I didn't even fully realize what I was doing at first, only that my feet were moving, guiding me down the hallway toward the bedroom Robert and I had shared for over 40 years. 40 years. And somehow there were parts of him I had never known. The door creaked softly as I pushed it open. Everything was exactly the same. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand. His favorite book, half finished, rested beside them, a folded receipt marking his place. His jacket still hung on the back of the chair as if he might walk in at any moment and slip it on before heading out the door. The thought made my chest tighten. How many times had he walked out that door? To see her. I crossed the room slowly, my fingers brushing against the fabric of his jacket. It still smelled faintly of his cologne. Familiar. Comforting. And now, unbearable. I need the truth, I whispered to the empty room. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure of where to begin. Then I remembered something Michael had said. Dad didn't want you to know, which meant there was something to find, something he had hidden carefully enough that I had never stumbled across it. Until now. I turned toward his dresser. Robert had always been organized almost obsessively so. Every drawer had its purpose. Every document had its place. If there was a secret, it would be hidden well, but not perfectly. I opened the top drawer first. Nothing unusual. Watches, cufflinks, neatly folded handkerchiefs. The second drawer held socks and undershirts. The third, documents, insurance papers, tax returns, old warranties. I sifted through them slowly, methodically, my hands steady even as my heart raced. At first, everything looked normal. Too normal. Then I noticed it. A small envelope tucked beneath a stack of older files. Unmarked. No label. No return address. Just there. My fingers hesitated for a moment before pulling it out. It felt heavier than it should have. Inside, I found a single key. Small, metal, and unfamiliar. I turned it over in my hand, frowning. It wasn't for our house. I knew every key we owned. It wasn't for Michael's place either. Which meant... My breath caught. I reached back into the envelope. There was something else. A folded slip of paper. I unfolded it carefully. A utility bill, addressed not to Robert Coleman, but to A. Brooks. The address printed at the top meant nothing to me at first, but as I stared at it longer, something shifted. Because it wasn't far. In fact, it was only about 20 minutes from our house. And the date... My stomach dropped. It was recent, very recent. Not from years ago, from just last month, which meant whatever Robert had been doing. He had been doing it until the very end. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. A. Brooks, I murmured. Angela. It had to be. The woman from the funeral, the woman Sophie had pointed at. The woman my husband had been visiting. For how long? Years, decades. And why? I pressed my fingers against my temples, trying to steady myself. Think Danielle. Jumping to conclusions wouldn't help, but the pieces were starting to form a picture. A key, a separate address, a woman, a child, and a secret my own son had known about. I looked around the room again as if expecting more answers to suddenly appear, but everything else remained silent. Still. Hiding. I stood up again, slower this time, and walked toward the closet. Robert's clothes were lined up neatly, just like always. Shirts by color, jackets by season, shoes arranged in pairs below, nothing out of place, nothing suspicious. And yet, everything felt different now, like I was standing in a stranger's life. I reached into one of his jacket pockets almost without thinking. Empty. Another one. Nothing. Then in the inside pocket of his dark blue coat, the one he wore on colder evenings, I felt something. A crumpled receipt. I pulled it out and smoothed it carefully. A small hardware store, dated 3 weeks ago, and scribbled across the back in Robert's handwriting were 2 words. Blue door. My heart started pounding again. Sophie's voice echoed in my mind. There were stairs and a blue door. This wasn't coincidence. This was confirmation. I sank back against the closet wall, the realization settling over me like a weight I couldn't shake. He had written it down. He had gone there recently. He had taken Sophie there, and he had hidden all of it from me. Why, I whispered, my voice cracking. But the room gave me no answer. Only silence. Only absence. I looked back at the key in my hand. Cold. Solid, real, whatever waited behind that blue door. It was no longer just a suspicion. It was a place, a destination, a truth. And I knew deep down that I wouldn't be able to rest. Not sleep, not breathe properly until I saw it for myself. Until I stood in front of that door and demanded answers. Even if those answers broke me completely, I closed my fingers tightly around the key as if it might disappear if I let go. Then I stood up, my decision already made. Tomorrow, I would go, alone. Because whatever I was about to uncover, it was something I needed to face on my own. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blue door. Not clearly, not fully formed, but enough to haunt me. A flash of color at the end of a narrow hallway. The echo of Sophie's voice. The image of that woman standing at my husband's funeral, watching from a distance as if she belonged there, and yet didn't. By morning, I was already dressed. I didn't tell Michael where I was going. I didn't tell Rachel either. Part of me knew they would try to stop me, or worse, try to control what I saw, what I heard, what I believed. No. This time I needed the truth without filters, without protection, without lies. The drive felt longer than 20 minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I followed the address from the utility bill. The neighborhoods changed gradually from the familiar tree-lined streets near my home to quieter, older buildings with chipped paint and narrow parking spaces. Not unsafe, but not the kind of place Robert had ever mentioned. Not the kind of place I had ever imagined him going. I pulled into a small lot beside a 3-story apartment building, and there it was. A faded blue door at the side entrance. My breath caught. Sophie hadn't imagined it. The stairs she mentioned were there too, metal slightly rusted leading up to a second-floor landing, the kind that creaked under your weight, announcing your presence before you even reached the top. I sat in the car for a moment staring. This was real. All of it. I could still turn around, drive home, pretend none of this existed. But then I remembered Michael's silence, Rachel's careful words, Robert's hidden key, and Sophie's innocent voice. I stepped out of the car. Each footstep felt heavier than the last as I approached the building. The morning air was cool, but I barely noticed. My focus narrowed to one thing, the door. The blue door. Up close, it looked even more worn. The paint chipped in places, revealing older layers beneath. Someone had tried to keep it clean, though. The handle was polished from use, frequent use. My stomach twisted. I reached into my purse and pulled out the key. For a moment, my hand hovered in the air. Then I forced myself to move. The key slid into the lock smoothly, too smoothly, as if it had been used many times before. I closed my eyes briefly, gathering what little strength I had left, and turned it. A soft click. The door opened. I stepped inside. The stairwell smelled faintly of detergent and something sweet like baked goods, cookies. Sophie's words echoed again. I climbed the stairs slowly, each creak loud in the quiet building. My heart pounded so hard I was sure anyone nearby could hear it. At the top there were only 2 apartments. One door was closed, the other slightly open. A sliver of light spilling into the hallway. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was home. For a brief second, fear flickered through me. Not fear of danger, but fear of confirmation. Because once I stepped through that door, there would be no going back, no pretending, no undoing what I was about to learn. I raised my hand and knocked gently. The door opened wider almost immediately, and there she was, Angela Brooks. Up close, she looked different than she had at the funeral. Less distant, more real. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands falling around her face. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, nothing remarkable, nothing extravagant, but her eyes. Her eyes held recognition, and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "You came," she said softly, not surprised, not defensive, just certain. My throat tightened. "You knew I would." I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded once. "I've been expecting you." Those words sent a chill through me. How I demanded. How could you possibly expect me? She stepped back slightly, opening the door wider. "Because Robert told me," she said. My heart skipped. He said that if anything ever happened to him, you would come looking for answers. The mention of his name hit harder than I expected. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't say his name like you knew him." Angela didn't flinch. "I did know him," she replied calmly. I felt something inside me snap. "Then tell me what I don't know," I said, stepping inside without waiting for permission, because clearly there's a lot. The apartment was small but tidy. A couch, a modest kitchen, a table with 2 chairs, and on that table, a plate of cookies. Still warm. My chest tightened. This was real, all of it. "Sit down," Angela said gently. "I'm not here to sit," I snapped. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." There was a brief silence between us, heavy, loaded. "You were at the funeral," I said finally. Why her gaze softened slightly. "I wanted to say goodbye." "You could have come up to me," I said bitterly, "introduced yourself, saved my granddaughter the trouble of exposing whatever this is." Her lips pressed together. "I didn't want to hurt you." A sharp laugh escaped me. "It's a little late for that, don't you think?" She didn't respond. Instead, she glanced toward the hallway behind her, and that's when I heard it. A small sound. Footsteps. I turned just in time to see a boy step into view, about 10 years old, dark hair, quiet eyes, and something about his face. My breath caught. No. It couldn't be. But the resemblance, the shape of his jaw, the way his eyes moved, it was subtle, but unmistakable. I staggered slightly, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Angela didn't answer right away. The boy looked between us, uncertain. "Go back to your room, Ethan," she said gently. He hesitated, then nodded and disappeared down the hallway. The silence that followed was suffocating. I turned back to Angela slowly. "Tell me the truth," I said, my voice trembling now. "Is he—" I couldn't even finish the sentence because I wasn't sure I could survive hearing the answer. Angela met my gaze, and for the first time I saw something break in her expression. Not guilt, not fear, but pain. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. Those words again. Everyone kept saying that. "It never is," I whispered bitterly. I straightened, forcing myself to meet her eyes. "Then explain it to me," I said. "Explain why my husband had a key to your apartment. Explain why my son knew about you. Explain why there's a boy in that hallway who looks like him." My voice cracked on the last word. Angela took a slow breath, and then she said something that made my entire world tilt again. "I've been waiting years to tell you," she said softly. "Years. Not weeks, not months. Years." My heart pounded as I took a step closer. "Then start talking," I said, because whatever truth she was about to reveal, I had a feeling it was bigger and more devastating than anything I had imagined. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between me and Angela, like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap at the slightest movement. "I've been waiting years to tell you," she had said. Years. That word echoed in my head louder than anything else. How long, I asked, my voice low, controlled. How long has this been going on? Angela didn't answer immediately. She walked over to the table, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge as if grounding herself. "A long time," she said finally. "That's not an answer," I snapped. She nodded, accepting the frustration in my voice. "About 10 years," she said. 10 years. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. 10 years of lies, 10 years of secrets, 10 years of my husband walking out of our home, our life, and stepping into something I knew nothing about. I let out a shaky breath, gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. "And you expect me to believe there's an innocent explanation for that?" I asked bitterly. Angela met my gaze. "Yes." I let out a hollow laugh. "You're going to have to do better than that." She nodded again, slowly, as if she had expected nothing less. "I will," she said, "but you have to let me explain everything. I'm listening," I said, though my arms were crossed tightly over my chest as if I could hold myself together that way. Angela glanced toward the hallway where the boy Ethan had disappeared. "He shouldn't hear this," she murmured. "Then talk," I insisted. She took a deep breath. "Robert wasn't who you think he was," she began. Something in me recoiled at that. "Don't," I warned. "Don't try to rewrite who he was to me." "I'm not," she said quickly. "I'm telling you there was more to him. Things he didn't know how to tell you, or didn't want to," I said sharply. She hesitated. Maybe both. That stung more than I expected. I looked away for a moment, my eyes falling on the small details around the apartment. A framed drawing on the wall, clearly done by a child. A bookshelf with a few worn novels. A pair of sneakers by the door. This wasn't a secret love nest. It was a home. Simple. quiet, lived in, which somehow made everything worse. "What did he mean to you?" I asked, finally turning back to her. Angela's expression softened, but not in the way I expected. There was no romantic longing there. No possessiveness, just something deeper. "He saved us," she said. I frowned. "Saved you." She nodded. "A long time ago, I was in a very bad place," she continued. "Financially, emotionally, everything was falling apart. And Robert just stepped in," I asked, skepticism thick in my voice. "Yes. Why?" I demanded. "Why you?" Angela hesitated again. That hesitation made my stomach twist. "Because he felt responsible," she said carefully. "Responsible." The word hung in the air between us. For what I pressed, she looked at me, really looked at me as if weighing something in her mind. "I'll get to that," she said softly. "No," I snapped. "You don't get to it. You tell me now." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I'm trying," she said, her voice still calm but firmer now. "But if you want the truth, you have to hear all of it." I clenched my fists at my sides. Every instinct in me screamed that she was holding something back, that she was choosing her words carefully, too carefully. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "Keep talking." Angela nodded. "He started by helping with small things," she said. "Groceries, bills, repairs around the apartment, things I couldn't afford at the time. And you just accepted that?" I asked incredulously. "I didn't have a choice," she said quietly. "I had a child to take care of." My eyes flicked toward the hallway again. "Ethan. His father?" I asked. Angela's expression shifted just slightly. "He wasn't around," she said. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Not around, not gone, not dead, just not around. "And Robert filled that role?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "No," she said quickly. "Not like that." Then how I demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that." Angela shook her head. "You're jumping to conclusions." "Of course I am," I shot back. "What else am I supposed to do?" "My husband spent 10 years coming here, giving you money, being part of your life, and I knew nothing about it." Her gaze softened again. "I know," she said quietly, "and I'm sorry." The apology caught me off guard. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't manipulative. It sounded genuine. But it didn't change anything. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Another silence fell between us. Heavier this time. "You said he felt responsible," I said finally, my voice quieter now. "Responsible for what?" Angela looked down at her hands. For a moment I thought she might not answer. Then she took a slow breath. "There was an accident," she said. My heart skipped. "An accident?" She nodded. "Years ago, before Ethan was born." I felt my pulse quicken. What kind of accident? Angela's fingers tightened slightly against each other. The kind that changes everything, she said softly. Frustration surged through me again. "Stop speaking in riddles," I snapped. "Just tell me what happened." She looked up at me then, and in her eyes I saw it clearly for the first time. Pain, deep, unresolved. "He never told you, did he?" she asked. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He didn't." Angela nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something for her. "I didn't think he would," she said. "Then tell me," I insisted, "because I'm done guessing." She opened her mouth to speak and then stopped. Her gaze shifted past me. I turned slightly, following her line of sight. Ethan was standing at the end of the hallway again, quiet, watching, listening. Angela exhaled softly. "Ethan," she said gently, "I told you to stay in your room." "I heard voices," he said. His eyes flicked toward me, curious, cautious, and again that resemblance hit me like a blow. I looked away quickly. "Go on," I said to Angela, my voice tight. "He's already heard enough, hasn't he?" Angela hesitated, then she nodded. "You're right," she said quietly. She turned back to me, and this time when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made my chest tighten before she even finished the sentence. "The accident," she said slowly, "is the reason Robert spent the rest of his life trying to make things right." My heart began to pound again. "What did he do?" I whispered. Angela held my gaze, and for the first time since I had walked through that door, I felt something shift, because whatever she was about to say, it wasn't just going to hurt. It was going to change everything. "What did he do?" I asked again, my voice barely holding together. Angela didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Ethan. He was still standing at the end of the hallway, his small frame tense, his eyes moving between us like he was trying to piece together a story that no child should have to understand. "Ethan," she said gently, "why don't you go finish your homework, okay?" "I don't have homework," he replied. Of course he didn't. It was a Saturday morning. Angela closed her eyes briefly as if searching for patience. "Then go play in your room," she said softly. "Please." He hesitated. Then his gaze shifted to me again. "Are you mad?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. I blinked, my anger faltering for just a second. I started, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? Yes, I was mad. At his mother, at my son, at my husband, at the entire situation. But not at him. Not this boy who had done nothing except exist in a story he didn't choose. "No," I said finally, my voice softer than before. "I'm not mad at you." He studied my face as if trying to decide whether to believe me. Then he nodded once and disappeared back down the hallway. The moment he was gone, the tension rushed back in, stronger, sharper. I turned back to Angela. "You were saying I prompted." She exhaled slowly. "Yes," she said, "the accident." But instead of continuing, she moved toward the kitchen counter and picked up a glass of water, taking a small sip. The pause stretched too long. "Angela?" I said, my patience thinning again. "Stop stalling." "I'm not stalling," she replied quietly. "I'm trying to say this the right way." "There is no right way," I snapped. "Just say it." She set the glass down carefully. Then she turned to face me fully, and for the first time there was no hesitation in her eyes. "Before Ethan was born, she said I was married." The word hit me like a small, unexpected crack in the wall I had built around my assumptions. Married. "So where is he?" I asked quickly. "Your husband." Angela's gaze dropped for a fraction of a second, then she looked back up. "He's gone," she said. "Gone." The word landed heavily between us. How I asked my voice quieter now. Angela held my gaze. "There was a car accident," she said. My stomach tightened. "A car accident," I repeated slowly. She nodded, and Robert, she added carefully, was involved. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Involved how, I asked, my heart starting to pound again. Angela hesitated, but only for a moment this time. He was the other driver. The words hung in the air, cold, sharp, unforgiving. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "You're telling me—" I began, my voice shaking, "that my husband was in the accident that killed your husband." Angela nodded once. "Yes." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not possible." "He never told you," she said softly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And the worst part was, she was right. He hadn't. Not once in all our years together had Robert ever mentioned anything like that. Not a serious accident, not a death, nothing. He wouldn't. I started, then stopped. Wouldn't hide something like that, wouldn't keep something so important from me. The truth was, I didn't know anymore. "I found out later," Angela continued, "after everything happened. There was an investigation, of course. Police reports, insurance, lawyers." Her voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of something else beneath it. Something old, something that hadn't fully healed. And it was his fault I asked my throat tight. Angela shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "Not entirely. Not entirely." The ambiguity twisted in my chest. "What does that mean?" I demanded. "It means—" She said carefully, "It wasn't as simple as one person being right and the other being wrong." "That's not an answer," I said. "It's the truth," she replied. I let out a frustrated breath, running a hand through my hair. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered. "If it wasn't his fault, then why all of this?" I gestured around the apartment. "The money, the visits, the secrecy." Angela's expression softened again. "Because that's who he was," she said quietly. I shook my head. No, I said, that's not enough. People don't spend 10 years secretly supporting someone out of what guilt, sympathy? Yes, she said simply. I stared at her. You expect me to believe that I expect you to listen, she replied gently. Something about her tone, calm, steady, unyielding, made it harder to argue, harder to dismiss. He came to see us a few months after the accident, she continued. At first, I didn't even want to see him. I blamed him. I hated him. The words were raw, honest. I would have hated him too, I said before I could stop myself. Angela gave a small, sad smile. I did, she said, for a long time. So what changed? I asked. She looked down at her hands again. Life, she said, bills, debt, a baby on the way, no support system. My chest tightened slightly. And he offered to help, I said. She nodded. I didn't accept it at first, she admitted. I didn't want anything from him. I didn't want to owe him anything. But you did eventually, I said. I had to, she replied quietly. There was no defensiveness in her voice, no shame either, just truth. And that's when this started, I asked, gesturing around again. The visits, the money, the secrecy. Angela hesitated. Yes, she said. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. Secrecy, I repeated. That's the part I don't understand. She looked at me. He didn't want to hurt you. The same line. Again. I felt something sharp twist inside me. So instead, I said bitterly, he lied to me for 10 years. Angela didn't respond, because there was no denying that. Silence filled the room once more. But this time it felt different. Less explosive. More heavy. Weighted with something deeper than just anger. I looked toward the hallway again where Ethan had disappeared, and despite everything, despite the confusion, the anger, the betrayal, one question still burned brighter than the rest. Is he Robert's son? I asked quietly. Angela's eyes widened slightly. What Ethan? I said, forcing the words out. Is he my husband's child? The question hung in the air like a blade. Angela stared at me for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No, the answer came quickly, firmly, without hesitation. But somehow, that didn't make it easier. Then why does he look like him? I whispered. Angela exhaled slowly. I don't know, she said. Maybe you see what you're afraid to see. Maybe. Or maybe I was right all along. I looked down at my hands, still trembling slightly. Nothing about this situation was simple. Nothing about it made sense. And yet, pieces were starting to fall into place. Not all of them, not yet, but enough to shift something inside me. Because if what Angela was saying was true, then this wasn't a story about betrayal. It was a story about something else entirely. Something heavier, more complicated, more human. But I wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. I looked back up at her, my eyes steady despite the storm inside me. Keep talking, I said. Because whatever truth remained hidden, I was going to uncover all of it, no matter how much it hurt. Keep talking, I had said. But Angela didn't. Not right away. Instead, she looked at me for a long moment, really looked at me as if measuring how much more I could take. You should hear the rest from Michael, she said finally. The suggestion hit me like a slap. My son? I asked, my voice sharpening again. You think I haven't heard enough lies from him already? It's not about lies, she said gently. It's about what he knows, what Robert asked him to carry. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, I'm sure he carried it just fine, I said. 10 years of silence, that takes practice. Angela didn't argue. She simply held my gaze. Go home, she said softly. Ask him, and then come back if you still have questions. Something about the way she said it calm, certain, made my anger falter just enough to let doubt slip in. Because if there was more, if there were pieces I didn't have yet, then maybe I did need to hear Michael's side, even if it broke me all over again. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and walked out. The drive back home felt different from the one earlier that morning, before I had been chasing answers. Now, I was carrying them, or at least part of them, Enough to know that everything I had believed about my marriage was incomplete. Enough to know that my husband had lived a second life not out of love for another woman, but out of something I still didn't fully understand. And enough to know that my son had been part of it. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles after something has already broken. "Michael," I called out. No answer. I stepped further inside my heels, clicking softly against the hardwood floor. "Rachel." I tried again. Still nothing. Then I heard it. Voices. Low. Tense. Coming from the living room, I moved toward the sound, my heart picking up speed with every step, and when I reached the doorway, I stopped. Michael and Rachel were sitting on the couch. Sophie was in the corner, playing quietly with her stuffed bear, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. Michael looked up first, and the moment he saw me, everything on his face changed. Guilt, fear, resignation. "You went," he said, not a question. A statement. "Yes," I replied. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. "Danielle," she began, her voice cautious. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Not yet." My gaze stayed fixed on Michael. "We need to talk." He swallowed hard, then nodded. "Okay." Rachel shifted beside him. "I think I should stay," she said. "No," I replied immediately. "This is between me and my son." Michael hesitated, glancing at Rachel, but then he nodded again. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I'll talk to her." Rachel looked between us, clearly uncomfortable, but she didn't argue further. She stood up and walked over to Sophie. "Come on, sweetie," she said gently. "Let's go to the kitchen." Sophie looked up, but Grandma just got back. "We'll be right here," Rachel assured her. "Come help me with something." After a moment, Sophie nodded and followed her out. The room fell into silence. Just me and Michael. Finally. I stepped forward slowly, stopping a few feet in front of him. How long, I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. He didn't ask what I meant. He just sighed. "About 10 years, he said. The same answer Angela had given. That consistency made it worse. 10 years, I repeated. "You knew for 10 years. He nodded. "And you said nothing." Another nod. I felt something rise in my chest. Anger, hurt, betrayal, all tangled together. Why, I demanded. Michael leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. "Because Dad asked me not to," he said. "That's not good enough," I snapped. "I know," he said quickly. "I know it's not, but it's the truth." I stared at him. "My own son," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "You chose his secret over me." His head snapped up. "No," he said firmly, "it wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I shot back. He hesitated, and that hesitation again felt like a knife twisting deeper. "It was complicated," he said. I let out a hollow laugh. "It always is," I said. "That seems to be the theme of the day." Michael ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. "Mom, I didn't want to hurt you." There it was again. That same line. "I'm already hurt," I said quietly, "so you can stop pretending you protected me." He flinched slightly at that. "I thought I was," he admitted. At first I echoed. He nodded. "When I found out, I thought it was what you think it is now." My stomach tightened. "You thought he was having an affair." "Yes," he said, the word hung between us, ugly, heavy, and I asked. Michael shook his head. I was wrong. I crossed my arms, waiting. "So was I," said. "At least that's what Angela claims." His eyes lifted to meet mine. "You went to see her," he said again. "Yes, and she told you about the accident. It wasn't a question." I felt a chill run through me. "You knew about that too," I said slowly. Michael nodded. "I found out before you did," he said. "Dad told me a few years ago, so even after knowing, he still kept it from me. Why didn't he tell me?" I asked, my voice softer now but more dangerous. Michael exhaled slowly. "Because he was afraid. Of what I demanded. Of me, of losing you," he said. The answer hit harder than I expected. I blinked, caught off guard. "Losing me," I repeated. He nodded. "He thought if you knew he had been involved in something like that, it would change how you saw him." It did. I said quietly. Michael winced. I know, he said. That's exactly what he was afraid of. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't just anger filling the space. It was something else, something heavier. You should have told me, I said finally. I wanted to, he admitted. More than once. Then why didn't you? He looked down at his hands. Because I saw what it was doing to him, he said. I frowned. What do you mean? Michael's voice dropped. He never forgave himself, he said, not for a second. The words settled into me slowly. He carried that guilt every day, Michael continued, helping Angela and Ethan. It wasn't just charity. It was the only way he knew how to live with what happened. I swallowed hard. And you believed that was enough, I asked. No, Michael said immediately. I didn't think anything would ever be enough. Then why keep helping him hide it? I pressed. Michael looked up at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not just guilt, not just fear, but conflict. Because I didn't know what the right thing was, he admitted. Tell you the truth and risk destroying you, or stay silent and carry it with him. My chest tightened. And you chose him, I said. He shook his head. I chose. The version of our family that still worked, he said quietly. That answer hurt more than anything else, because it meant he had made a choice, a conscious one, and I hadn't been part of it. I turned away, unable to look at him for a moment. Everything felt unstable, uncertain, like the ground beneath me could give out at any second. Mom, Michael said softly behind me. I didn't respond. There's more, he added. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course there was. There was always more. What I asked, my voice barely steady. Michael hesitated. Then he said something that made my heart start pounding all over again. Dad didn't just feel responsible for the accident, he said. I turned slowly to face him. What do you mean? Michael swallowed hard. There's something else you need to know, he said, and the look on his face told me whatever came next was going to change everything all over again. There's something else you need to know. Michael's words lingered in the air long after he said them. I stared at him waiting, but before he could continue, the sharp ring of my phone cut through the silence. The sound made me flinch. For a second, I considered ignoring it. I didn't have the energy for anything else. Not now, not when everything I thought I knew was already unraveling. But Michael glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Mr. Henderson, he said, our family attorney. My stomach tightened. Of course. The will. I closed my eyes briefly before answering. Danielle Coleman speaking, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Mrs. Coleman, Mr. Henderson replied, his tone respectful but firm. I'm very sorry for your loss. I wanted to let you know that we're ready to proceed with the reading of Robert's will. If you and your family are available, I suggest we do it today. Today. Everything was happening too fast, too much, too soon. But part of me knew I needed this. I needed to hear what Robert had left behind. Not just in terms of money or property, but in terms of truth. We'll be there, I said. The office of Henderson and Blythe was just as I remembered. Clean, professional, cold, the kind of place where lives were reduced to documents and signatures. Michael and Rachel sat beside me in the conference room, both unusually quiet. Rachel reached for Michael's hand at one point, squeezing it gently. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. I didn't have the strength for another confrontation. Not yet. Mr. Henderson entered a moment later carrying a thick folder. Thank you all for coming, he said, taking a seat across from us. I know this isn't easy, but I'll walk you through everything as clearly as possible. I nodded. Please, I said, just start. He opened the folder carefully. As you know, Robert Coleman updated his will approximately 3 years ago, he began. He made several revisions at that time, including adjustments to asset distribution, 3 years ago. That meant this wasn't something done in haste. It was planned, intentional. He left the primary residence and the majority of his retirement accounts to you, Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Henderson continued. I barely reacted. Of course he did. That part was expected. But there are additional provisions, he added. My heart started to pound. Additional provisions. I felt Michael shift slightly beside me. Rachel's grip on his hand tightened. Mr. Henderson turned a page. Robert also established a trust fund, he said, allocated for the benefit of two individuals, Angela Brooks and Ethan Brooks. The room went silent, completely, utterly silent. For a moment I thought I had misheard him, but the look on Michael's face confirmed it. It was true. A trust. For them. My hands went cold. How much, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Henderson hesitated. $500,000, he said. The number hit like a physical blow. $500,000. For a woman I had never known. For a child who wasn't mine. For what I demanded, my voice rising, despite my efforts to control it. For what reason, Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses slightly. There is a note, he said, written by Robert himself. Would you like me to read it? Yes, I said immediately, because whatever justification Robert had left behind, I needed to hear it. Mr. Henderson unfolded a single sheet of paper, and then he began to read. If you're hearing this, Danielle, then I am no longer there to explain things myself, and for that, I am deeply sorry. My throat tightened. That was his voice. Not physically, but in the way the words were written. I could hear him. There are parts of my life that I kept from you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't trust myself to tell the story without breaking everything we had. Tears blurred my vision. Breaking everything. That's exactly what this felt like. Angela Brooks and her son Ethan came into my life under circumstances I wish I could undo. I made mistakes, some small, some large, but the consequences of those choices followed me every day after. I clenched my hands together in my lap. Mistakes, still vague, still incomplete. I tried to make things right in the only way I knew how. Not to replace what was lost, because that's impossible, but to carry a piece of the responsibility that belonged to me. Responsibility. The word echoed again, just like Angela had said. I know this may hurt you. I know it may confuse you, and I know you may never fully understand why I chose to handle things the way I did. He was right. I didn't understand. Not yet. But please believe this, I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. You were my home, my life, my everything. A tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, because love didn't feel like enough right now. Not with everything else hanging over it. The trust I've left is not a replacement for anything. It is simply a continuation of something I began long ago, something I couldn't walk away from. I let out a shaky breath. Continuation. Not closure. Not resolution. Just continuation. If there is one thing I ask of you, Danielle, it is this before you judge me, before you decide what this means. Learn the full truth. My chest tightened. The full truth. Even now he knew I didn't have it. Even now he was asking for patience. For understanding, because the story is not what it looks like. The final line lingered in the air, heavy, unfinished. Mr. Henderson lowered the paper slowly. That concludes his note, he said. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence pressed in from all sides. I stared at the table in front of me, my reflection faintly visible in its polished surface. A woman I barely recognized looked back. Broken. Confused, angry, and still searching. So he left them money, I said, finally my voice flat. A lot of money. Yes, Mr. Henderson confirmed. And no explanation beyond that, I added. There are supporting documents related to the trust, he said, but the personal reasoning is limited to what he wrote. Of course it was. Because Robert had never been good at saying the hard things out loud. He carried them instead, silently. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping softly against the floor. I need air, I said. No one stopped me. No one tried. Because I think they all knew I was standing on the edge of something. Something I didn't fully understand yet, but something that was about to pull me deeper. Because now it wasn't just about secrets, or lies, or even betrayal. It was about intention, responsibility, and a truth that was still just out of reach. And I wasn't going to stop, not until I found it. I didn't go home after leaving the lawyer's office. I couldn't. The walls of that house, once filled with memories of love, laughter, and quiet evenings with Robert, now felt like they were closing in on me. Every room held a question I couldn't answer. Every object reminded me of a man I was no longer sure I fully knew. So I drove. Not aimlessly, not this time. I drove back to the blue door. Angela opened it before I could knock, as if she had been standing there waiting. Again. "You went to the reading," she said quietly. I nodded. "He left you money." I added, my voice sharper than I intended. "A lot of it." She didn't look surprised. "I know," she said. "Of course she did. Did you know how much I pressed?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Something in me flared again. "And you accepted it," I said. Her expression tightened slightly. "I didn't ask for it," she replied. "But yes, I accepted it." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The apartment looked the same, unchanged, stable, while everything in my world felt like it was falling apart. "Then you owe me the truth," I said, turning to face her. "All of it. No more half answers. No more pauses. I want everything." Angela studied me for a moment. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "You deserve that." I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "Start with the accident," I said. She took a slow breath and motioned toward the couch. This time I sat, not because I wanted to, but because I felt like my legs might not hold me if I didn't. Angela sat across from me, and then finally, she began. "It was 11 years ago," she said. "Late fall, cold but no snow yet. My husband Daniel was driving home from work." She paused briefly as if seeing it in her mind. "I was at home, pregnant with Ethan, about 6 months along. We were excited, nervous but happy." Her voice softened on the last word, happy. I swallowed hard, and then I prompted. Angela's gaze dropped. "There was a collision," she said, "at an intersection. 2 cars. One of them ran a red light." My chest tightened. "Which one?" I asked. She looked up at me. "That's the complicated part." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said slowly, "that the reports were inconclusive." "Inconclusive," I repeated. "Someone ran the light." "Yes," she said, "but there were conflicting witness statements. Some said it was Daniel. Some said it was Robert. The uncertainty twisted something inside me." "So no one knows?" I asked. Angela shook her head. "Not for sure," she said. "But Daniel—" Her voice faltered slightly. "Daniel didn't survive long enough to tell his side." The words hit harder than I expected. I exhaled slowly, trying to process it. "And Robert?" I asked. "He survived," she said. "Minor injuries, a concussion, some broken ribs. Of course he did." I felt a bitter edge creep into my thoughts before I could stop it. And after that, I asked. Angela leaned back slightly, her eyes distant. "After that, everything fell apart," she said. "Hospital bills, funeral arrangements, legal questions, and me alone pregnant, trying to understand how my life had changed overnight." I didn't interrupt. I just listened. Because for the first time, I could hear the weight behind her words. "Robert came to see me a few weeks later," she continued. "I didn't want to see him. I blamed him. Even without knowing for sure what happened, I blamed him. I would have too," I said quietly. Angela gave a small, sad nod. "I said things to him I'm not proud of," she admitted. "I told him to leave, to never come back. But he did." I said, "Yes." She said he did. There was no bitterness in her voice, just fact. Why, I asked. Angela met my gaze. "Because he couldn't live with it," she said. The answer was simple, but it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. "He kept coming back," she continued. "At first just to check on me, to see if I needed anything. I refused him every time. And then I asked. And then Ethan was born," she said softly. The name hung between us. I glanced toward the hallway instinctively. "He came again after that," she said. "Brought supplies, diapers, food, things I couldn't afford." "And you accepted?" I asked. She nodded. "I didn't have a choice anymore," she said. "Pride doesn't feed a baby." "No, it doesn't." I shifted slightly in my seat, my anger beginning to blur with something else, something more complicated. And that's when it started, Angela continued. The help, the visits, the arrangement. Arrangement, I repeated. She nodded. He didn't want it to be public, she said. Didn't want it to turn into something else. He said he wasn't trying to replace Daniel. He wasn't trying to step into that role. But he still showed up, I said. Yes, she said, over and over again, yes. The consistency of it unsettled me. Not because it confirmed betrayal, but because it suggested something deeper, something deliberate. He fixed things around the apartment, she said, helped with bills when he could, made sure we had what we needed, and you just let him, I asked. Her expression shifted slightly. No, she said, I didn't just let him. I fought it for a long time. I frowned. Then why accept it at all? Angela held my gaze. Because eventually I realized something she said. What that? He wasn't doing it for me, she said quietly. I blinked. Then who? She took a breath. Himself. The answer hung in the air, heavy, complicated. He needed to believe he could balance something that couldn't be balanced, she continued. That he could carry part of the weight, even if it would never be enough. I looked down at my hands, my thoughts racing. That's not how life works, I said. No, she agreed. It's not. Silence settled again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt fuller, more complete, because for the first time I wasn't just hearing about secrets. I was starting to understand the reasons behind them. Not fully, not yet, but enough to shift something inside me. I looked back up at her. And Ethan, I asked, where does he fit into all of this? Angela's expression softened. He's my son, she said. I know that, I said. But what did Robert mean to him? She hesitated, then answered carefully. He was someone who showed up, she said. Someone who helped, someone who cared. Not a father, but not a stranger either. Something in between. And somehow, that felt even more complicated. I leaned back slowly, my mind struggling to hold all of it at once. The accident, the uncertainty, the guilt, the years of quiet support, none of it fit into the story I had built in my head. Not the story of betrayal, not the story of deception, something else, something harder to define. I exhaled slowly. So that's it, I asked. That's the whole story. Angela looked at me, and for the first time she hesitated again. Not like before. This hesitation felt different, heavier, more final. No, she said quietly. My heart started to pound again. There's one more thing, she added. Of course there was. There was always one more thing. What I asked. Angela held my gaze, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. But what she said changed everything. Robert didn't just feel responsible for the accident, she said. I froze. What do you mean? She took a slow breath. He believed, she said, that the accident happened because of something he did. Before either of them got into those cars, my mind reeled. Before the accident, I repeated. Angela nodded. Yes, the room felt smaller suddenly, tighter. What did he do? I whispered. Angela didn't look away, and that's when I knew the truth I had been chasing was finally about to break open. What did he do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Angela didn't look away. For the first time since I'd stepped into that apartment, there was no hesitation left in her eyes. Only truth. He made a phone call, she said. I frowned. A phone call. She nodded. To my husband, Daniel. The name landed heavily between us, and that caused the accident. I asked, confusion, mixing with the tension in my chest. Angela exhaled slowly. Not directly, she said, but Robert believed it did. I shook my head slightly. You're going to have to explain that, I said. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly together. A few hours before the accident, she began, Robert called Daniel. Why, I asked. Angela hesitated, then answered. They worked in the same industry, she said. Construction. Different companies, but they crossed paths on projects sometimes. I hadn't known that. Another piece of Robert's life I had never seen. They had a disagreement, she continued, about a contract, something small at least at the time. But it escalated. My stomach tightened. Escalated how voices were raised, she said. Things were said that shouldn't have been said. I could picture it. Robert stubborn when he believed he was right. A heated argument. Pride, ego. All right, I said slowly, but arguments happen. That doesn't explain he told Daniel to come meet him, Angela interrupted gently. I stopped. To meet him, I repeated. Yes, she said, to settle it face to face. A chill ran through me, and Daniel agreed. She nodded. He left work early, she said, got in his car, started driving. My pulse quickened. And Robert, I asked. Angela's expression darkened slightly. He changed his mind, she said. The words didn't make sense at first. Changed his mind, I echoed. He decided it wasn't worth it, she explained, that it was just an argument, that it didn't need to go any further. My heart sank. So he canceled. Angela shook her head slowly. No, she said. He didn't call him back. The silence that followed felt suffocating. You're saying, I began, my voice trembling. Daniel was driving to meet Robert, and Robert just didn't show up. Angela nodded. Yes. I felt something twist painfully in my chest, and on the way, I whispered. There was an accident, she finished. The room seemed to spin for a moment, not because the facts were unclear, but because they were too clear. He believed, I said slowly, trying to process it, that if he hadn't called, if he hadn't told Daniel to come, none of it would have happened. Angela's eyes filled with a quiet, familiar sadness. Yes, she said. That's what he believed. I leaned back, my mind racing. But that doesn't mean it was his fault, I said. It was an accident. There were conflicting reports. You said so yourself. I know, she said. Then why carry it like that? I demanded. Why let it consume him for 10 years? Angela held my gaze. Because that's who he was, she said softly. I shook my head. No, I said, that's not enough. It was for him, she replied. I stood up abruptly, pacing a few steps across the small living room. A phone call. A missed call back, a decision not to follow through. And somehow in Robert's mind that had turned into a lifetime of guilt. He blamed himself for a chain of events he couldn't control. I said more to myself than to her. Yes, Angela said quietly, and because of that, he spent the rest of his life trying to make it right. Yes. I stopped pacing and looked at her. That's not rational, I said. No, she agreed. It's not. Then why didn't anyone tell him that I asked? Why didn't you? A flicker of something crossed her face. I tried, she said, and he wouldn't hear it, she replied. Not fully, not completely. I exhaled sharply, so instead he built this. I gestured around the apartment, this whole second life. It wasn't a second life, she said gently. It looks like one I shot back. She didn't argue, because in many ways, it was. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. Everything inside me felt tangled, confused, pulled in opposite directions, because on one hand I could see it. The logic, however, flawed. A man haunted by a decision, a man trying to carry a weight that didn't fully belong to him. But on the other hand, he had hidden it from me, from his wife, from the person who was supposed to know him best. And the money I asked finally turning back to her. The trust. The $500,000. Angela hesitated. That was his idea, she said. I didn't ask for that, but you accepted it, I said. Yes, she admitted. Why her answer came without hesitation. Because I have a son, she said. The simplicity of it stopped me. I'm not proud of it, she added, but I won't apologize for doing what I need to do for him. I looked toward the hallway again. Ethan. A child caught in the aftermath of something he never chose. Just like Sophie had been in a different way. And him, I asked quietly. What did Robert mean to him? Angela's expression softened again. He was someone who showed up, she said. Not as a father, not trying to replace anyone, just someone who cared. I nodded slowly, trying to take it in, trying to fit it into the story I had been building in my head, and failing, because it didn't fit, not neatly, not simply. This wasn't betrayal, not in the way I had first imagined. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't a secret family. It was something else, something messier, something more human, a man trying and failing to fix something that couldn't be undone. I sank back into the couch, exhaustion washing over me. So all this time, I murmured, all those late nights, all those excuses. He was here, Angela said softly. Helping, fixing, trying. I closed my eyes briefly, and for the first time since this all began, the anger shifted, not gone, but changed, because now it had something else mixed into it. Understanding, reluctant, uncomfortable, but real. I wish he had told me, I said quietly. Angela didn't respond, because there was nothing she could say to that. I opened my eyes again, staring at the floor. I could have helped him carry it, I added. We could have faced it together. He didn't want to risk losing you, she said gently, and instead I said bitterly he risked losing my trust. Silence followed, but this time it didn't feel as sharp, because the truth was finally there, not hidden, not incomplete, just painful and real. I took a slow breath, then another, letting it settle, letting it sink in, and when I finally looked up again, I knew one thing for certain. This story wasn't about what Robert had done wrong, not anymore. It was about what I was going to do with what he had left behind. I didn't remember leaving Angela's apartment. One moment, I was sitting on her couch trying to absorb the weight of everything she had told me, and the next, I was in my car staring straight ahead, my hands resting loosely on the steering wheel. The world outside moved normally. Cars passed. People crossed the street. A man laughed into his phone as he walked by. Life continued, as if mine hadn't just been quietly rewritten. I exhaled slowly and leaned my head back against the seat. A phone call. That's what it came down to. Not an affair, not betrayal, a decision made in frustration, a call placed in anger, a call not taken back, and a man, my husband, who had spent the rest of his life believing that one moment had destroyed another family. I closed my eyes. For years, I had thought I knew Robert completely. His habits, his routines, the way he liked his coffee, black no sugar, the way he always checked the locks twice before bed, the way he would hum under his breath when he thought no one was listening. But this part of him, the part that carried guilt so heavy it shaped an entire decade of his life, I had never seen it. Or maybe I had, and just didn't understand it. When I got home, the house felt different again. Not colder this time, just quieter, like it was waiting. Michael was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, staring down at his phone. He looked up when I walked in. "You went back," he said. I nodded. "Yes." He studied my face, searching for something. "Did she tell you?" he asked. "All of it," I replied. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Then you know," he said. I know what he believed, I corrected. I'm still trying to understand why he couldn't let it go. Michael didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. I wondered the same thing he admitted. I moved into the kitchen, leaning against the counter across from him, and I asked. He looked up at me, his expression serious. "Do you remember that year?" he said. Right after the accident, I frowned. "Of course I do," I said. "You had just started your new job. Robert was working long hours. We barely saw each other." Michael nodded. "That's when it started," he said. "What started?" I asked. "The changes," he replied. I felt my chest tighten slightly. "What kind of changes?" Michael hesitated, as if trying to choose the right words. He became quieter, he said, more distant. Not from us exactly, but from himself. I thought back, and slowly, I began to see it. The late nights, the distracted silences, the way he would sometimes stare off into space like he was somewhere else entirely. At the time, I had blamed stress, work, age, anything but this. I thought he was just tired, I murmured. "I did too," Michael said, at first. He leaned forward slightly, but then I found out about the accident, he continued, and everything started to make sense. "How did you find out?" I asked. "He told me," Michael said. I blinked. "He told you?" He nodded. "A few years after it happened," he said. I think he couldn't carry it alone anymore. A strange mix of emotions twisted inside me. Relief, hurt, confusion. He could tell you. I said quietly, but not me. It wasn't about trust, Michael said quickly. It was about fear. Fear of what I asked, though I already knew the answer. Fear of losing you, he said again. I looked away. The words didn't feel comforting. They felt complicated. Did he ever seem relieved? I asked. After helping Angela, after doing all of that, Michael shook his head. No, he said, not really. Then what was the point, I asked. To him, Michael said, it wasn't about feeling better. He paused. It was about feeling less guilty. Less guilty. Not free, not healed, just less. I swallowed hard. That's not living, I said. No, Michael agreed. It's not. Silence settled between us again. But this time it wasn't filled with anger. It was filled with something else. Understanding. Slow, reluctant, but growing. He used to sit in the garage sometimes, Michael added suddenly. I looked at him. What, late at night, he said. I'd hear him out there. Just sitting. Not doing anything, just sitting. I frowned. I never noticed that. You were asleep, he said gently. Of course I was. Living my life, trusting my husband, believing everything was as it seemed. I asked him once what he was thinking about, Michael continued. And what did he say I asked? Michael gave a small, sad smile. He said, I'm trying to figure out how to make something right that can't be fixed. The words hit me like a wave because they were so him, so Robert, always trying to fix things, even the ones that couldn't be fixed. I closed my eyes for a moment and suddenly memories started to shift. Not change, but take on new meaning. The times he insisted on helping strangers, the way he always over-tipped at restaurants, the quiet donations he made that he never talked about. I had always thought it was kindness, generosity, and it was. But now, I saw something else beneath it. A man trying to balance a scale that would never be even. He carried it everywhere, I whispered. Michael nodded. Yes. I opened my eyes again, looking at my son. And you carried it with him, I said. He didn't deny it. I tried, he said, but it wasn't mine to carry. No, I agreed, it wasn't. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been lingering in the back of my mind. Did he ever regret not telling me? I asked. Michael didn't hesitate. All the time, he said. My chest tightened. He talked about it, I asked. More than once, Michael said. He would say he should have told you, that you deserved to know. Then why didn't he? I pressed. Michael looked down at his hands. Because every time he got close, he said he would imagine the look on your face. I felt my breath catch. He thought you'd see him differently, Michael continued. Not as the man you married, but as the man who might have caused someone else's death. I swallowed hard, and he couldn't handle that. I said. Michael shook his head. No, he said. He couldn't. The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt softer. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had changed shape. It wasn't just anger anymore. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something more complex, something that didn't fit into simple categories. I leaned back against the counter, exhaling slowly. I wish I had known, I said again. I know, Michael said. I could have helped him, I added. I know, he repeated. I looked at him, my eyes searching his. Do you think he knew that I asked? Michael hesitated. Then he nodded. I think he did, he said. Then why? Because knowing something, Michael interrupted gently, and believing it are two different things. I stopped, because he was right. Robert might have known I loved him, might have known I would stand by him, but believing it, trusting it enough to risk everything that was something else entirely. I exhaled slowly, letting that settle. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was starting to see the surface, still far away, still uncertain, but there. And maybe, just maybe, I could reach it. That evening, the house felt different again. Not peaceful, not yet, but no longer suffocating. It was as if something heavy had shifted just enough to let a little air in. I stood by the kitchen sink, staring out at the backyard. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grass Robert used to mow every Saturday morning without fail. Routine, order, control, all the things he had held on to, while something far more chaotic lived quietly inside him. I heard small footsteps behind me. Grandma Sophie's voice was soft, careful. I turned. She stood in the doorway, still holding her stuffed bear, her big eyes searching my face like she was trying to read something she didn't fully understand. "Hey, sweetheart," I said gently. "Come here." She walked over, slowly climbing onto one of the kitchen chairs. "Are you still sad?" she asked. The question hit me harder than anything else that day, because it was so simple, so honest. "Yes," I said softly. "I am." She nodded as if that made sense. "I'm sad too," she said. I reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "I know you are," I said. "You loved Grandpa very much." She nodded again. "He used to take me places," she added after a moment. My heart tightened. Places, plural. "Can you tell me about that?" I asked gently. Sophie looked down at her bear, tracing her finger along one of its ears. "Sometimes he picked me up from school early," she said. "He said it was our special time." I felt something twist inside me. Special time, a phrase that now carried more weight than it should have. "Where did you go?" I asked. She shrugged slightly. "Different places," she said. "Sometimes the park, sometimes the store, and sometimes there." My chest tightened. "The place with the blue door?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes." I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, keeping my voice calm. "Did he tell you why you were going there?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "He said we were helping," she said. "Helping a friend. A friend. Not a secret. Not something wrong, just helping." "What kind of help?" I asked. She brightened slightly as if remembering something pleasant. "We brought groceries once," she said. "And toys. And he fixed a chair that was broken." I swallowed hard. Of course he did. Fixing things. That's what he had always done. "What about the lady?" I asked carefully. "The one you saw at the funeral," the cookie lady, Sophie said immediately. I couldn't help the faint, sad smile that touched my lips. "Yes," I said. "The cookie lady. She was nice," Sophie continued. "She always smiled, and she made chocolate chip cookies just for me." I nodded slowly. That sounded like Angela. "What about the boy?" I asked. "The one who lives there," Ethan, Sophie said. "He's quiet." I leaned forward slightly. "Did Grandpa talk to him?" I asked. Sophie nodded. "Sometimes," she said. "They played with cars. Grandpa fixed one that didn't work." My chest tightened again. That image. It was so simple, so ordinary, and yet it carried so much meaning now. "Did Grandpa ever say who they were?" I asked. Sophie shook her head. "No," she said. "Just that they needed help." I exhaled slowly. Of course he hadn't explained. How could he? How do you explain something like that to a child? Or to your wife? "Did Mommy know about this?" I asked gently. Sophie hesitated. Then she nodded. "She said it was okay," she said. "But we shouldn't talk about it a lot." My stomach tightened. Rachel. She had known too. Not just Michael. The whole family had been carrying pieces of this. Except me. "Why not?" I asked softly. "Why shouldn't you talk about it?" Sophie frowned slightly as if trying to remember. "Mommy said it might make you sad," she said. There it was. That same word again. Sad. Everything had been done to protect me from sadness, and in doing so, they had created something else entirely. Confusion, distance, secrets. I reached across the table and took Sophie's small hand in mine. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you didn't do anything wrong by telling me." She looked up at me, uncertain. "I didn't," she asked. "No," I said firmly. "You told the truth, and that's always the right thing to do." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Okay," she said. We sat there for a moment in quiet. Then she tilted her head. "Are you mad at Grandpa?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to answer, and then stopped. Because I didn't know. Not completely. Not anymore. I admitted slowly. She watched me closely. "Are you still?" she asked. I thought about everything I had learned, about the accident, the guilt, the years of quiet effort to make something right, and the man I had loved for so long. I think, I said carefully, I understand him a little better now. Sophie nodded as if that was enough. He was good, she said simply. The words hit me harder than anything else she had said, because they were so pure, so certain, and maybe she was right. Not perfect, not flawless, but good. I squeezed her hand gently. Yes, I said softly. He was. She smiled faintly, then climbed down from the chair. Can I have a cookie, she asked. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. A cookie, I repeated. She nodded. Like the ones the lady makes, she said. I let out a small, unexpected laugh. Not quite like that, I said. But I think we can manage something. She grinned and ran off toward the pantry. I watched her go, my heart feeling lighter. Not healed, not yet, but lighter. Because through her innocence, her honesty, her simple way of seeing things, the last pieces of the story had fallen into place. There had been no betrayal, no hidden love, no second family, just a man trying to carry a burden, a woman trying to survive, a child growing up in the space between them, and a little girl who had seen it all without understanding any of it. Until now. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The anger I had felt before, it was still there, but it had softened, changed, because now it had something else mixed into it. Clarity, and maybe the beginning of something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of the questions anymore. Those had finally quieted, but because of the answers. They moved through my mind in slow, steady waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes overwhelming, pulling me back through years of memories I thought I understood. Memories that now looked different. I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, listening to the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Robert had bought that clock on one of our trips years ago. I remembered teasing him about it, how it was too loud, too old-fashioned. He had smiled and said he liked the sound, said it reminded him that time was moving, that things mattered. At the time, I had laughed it off. Now, I wondered what he had really meant. Sometime after midnight, I gave up trying to sleep. I got out of bed and walked down the hallway quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. The house was dark, still, except for one place. The garage. A soft light glowed beneath the door. My steps slowed. Michael's words came back to me. He used to sit in the garage sometimes, late at night. For a moment, I just stood there staring at that thin line of light. Then I reached out and pushed the door open. The garage smelled faintly of wood and motor oil, familiar, comforting. And yet tonight it felt like stepping into a place I had never truly seen before. The light above the workbench was on, and everything was exactly where Robert had left it. His tools, his projects, a half-finished wooden frame clamped to the table. I stepped inside, slowly, my eyes moving over every detail. How many nights had he stood here, alone, thinking, trying to make sense of something that couldn't be undone? I moved toward the workbench, running my fingers lightly over the surface. There were small scratches, marks from years of use, evidence of time, of effort, of trying. And then I saw it. A small notebook. Tucked beneath a stack of tools, I hesitated. For a second it felt like crossing a line. Reading something meant only for him. But then I remembered he was gone, and whatever he had left behind was all I had left of the parts of him I never knew. I picked it up slowly. The cover was worn, the edges softened from use. I opened it carefully. The pages were filled with handwriting. Robert's handwriting, messy in places, tight and controlled in others. I flipped through a few pages, not really reading at first, just absorbing, until one line caught my eye. I should have called him back. My breath caught. I sat down on the small stool beside the bench, the notebook resting in my hands. And this time, I read. I keep replaying it. The call, the words I said, the way I let it end. If I had just picked up the phone again, if I had told him it wasn't worth it. My throat tightened. Danielle would tell me it wasn't my fault. I know she would. That's exactly why I can't tell her. A tear slipped down my cheek. Because he was right. I would have told him that. I would have tried to take that weight off him. But he had never given me the chance. I see her sometimes. The wife, the way she looks at me. I don't blame her. I wouldn't forgive me either. Angela. Even then she had been part of his thoughts. Not as something secret, but as something unresolved. I don't know how to fix this. I don't think it can be fixed, but I have to try something. I have to do something. I swallowed hard, turning the page. Michael asked me why I keep going back. I told him it's because it's the right thing to do. That's not the whole truth. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. The truth is, I don't know how to live with myself if I don't. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Because suddenly everything made sense. Not just the actions, but the feeling behind them. The weight, the need, the constant quiet pressure he had carried every day. I flipped to another page. I saw Sophie laugh today. For a moment, everything felt normal again. I wish I could stay in that moment. But I can't, because I know what's waiting when it ends. My chest ached. He had been living in two worlds, one with us, full of light, family, love, and another shadowed by something he couldn't escape. I wish I were a better man, the kind who could let this go, but I'm not. So I'll keep going, keep showing up, even if it never balances out. I closed the notebook slowly, my hands trembling. Better man. He had thought he wasn't one. After everything he had done, everything he had tried to do, he still believed he wasn't enough. I sat there in silence, the weight of it pressing down on me, and for the first time since this all began, I felt something shift completely, not just in my understanding, but in my heart, because the anger, the sharp burning anger I had carried since that moment at the funeral, it wasn't gone, but it had changed. It wasn't aimed at him anymore, not fully. It was aimed at the situation, the silence. The years we had lost to something that could have been shared. I would have stayed, I whispered into the quiet garage. I would have understood. But he had never believed that, and maybe that was the real tragedy. Not the accident, not the years of secrecy, but the fact that he had carried it alone when he didn't have to. I wiped my eyes, taking a slow, steady breath, and as I sat there surrounded by the pieces of his life, the tools, the unfinished projects, the quiet evidence of who he had been, I realized something. He hadn't been perfect, not even close, but he had been trying, every single day. And maybe that mattered more than anything else. I stood up slowly, holding the notebook against my chest for a moment before placing it back where I found it. Then I turned off the light and stepped out of the garage. But this time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was carrying something forward, something new, something I hadn't expected, understanding, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of forgiveness. The next morning I woke up with a strange kind of clarity, not peace, not yet, but something steadier than the storm I had been living in. For the first time since Robert's funeral, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I felt like I was choosing what came next. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long moment, letting that feeling settle into me. The house was quiet again, the soft hum of the morning just beginning outside. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear Rachel moving in the kitchen, the faint clink of dishes grounding me in something normal. But I knew normal wasn't coming back, not in the way it used to be, and maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Mom Michael's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He stood in the doorway, cautious, like he wasn't sure what version of me he was about to face. "I made coffee," he said. "If you want some." I nodded. "Thank you." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same place where everything had started to unravel just days before. But now the silence between us felt different, less sharp, more open. "I read something last night," I said finally. Michael looked up. In the garage, one of Dad's notebooks. His expression shifted. He kept a few of those, he said quietly. I never read them. I did, I replied. He nodded slowly as if he understood why. He blamed himself more than I realized. I added. Michael exhaled. Yeah, he said, he did. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. I used to think love meant sharing everything I said. Every thought, every fear, every mistake. Michael didn't interrupt. But now, I paused, searching for the right words. Now I think sometimes people hide things not because they don't love you, but because they don't think they deserve your understanding. Michael looked at me carefully. That sounds like him, he said. I nodded. It does. There was a quiet moment between us, then I set my mug down. I'm going to see Angela, I said. Michael blinked. Today, yes. Why, he asked, not challenging, just trying to understand. Because this story doesn't end with me knowing the truth, I said. It ends with what I do about it. He studied my face for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said simply. That was all. No resistance, no hesitation. And somehow that meant everything. The drive to the blue door felt different this time. Not heavy, not desperate. Still emotional, but clearer, more focused. When I pulled into the small lot, I didn't sit in the car. I didn't hesitate. I stepped out and walked straight to the building. Up the stairs, past the creak of each step, to the door I now knew far too well, and this time I knocked. There was a pause. Then the door opened. Angela stood there, surprise flickering across her face. I wasn't expecting you today, she said. I nodded. I know. For a moment, we just looked at each other, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as two people standing in the middle of the same complicated story. Can I come in? I asked. She stepped aside immediately. Of course. The apartment felt familiar now, less like a mystery, more like a place I was beginning to understand. Ethan was sitting at the table working on something with a pencil. He looked up as I entered. There was that same cautious curiosity in his eyes. Hi, I said gently. He nodded. Hi. Angela glanced at him. Ethan, why don't you take a break for a minute? He hesitated, then stood up and moved toward the hallway, but not before giving me one last look. And this time, I didn't look away. I've been thinking, I said once we were alone. Angela nodded, waiting. About everything you told me, I continued. About the accident, about Robert. She remained quiet. And about what comes next, I added. That got her attention. Her posture shifted slightly. What do you mean, she asked. I took a slow breath. I mean that whatever this was, whatever he was trying to do, it didn't end with him. Angela frowned slightly. I don't understand. I think you do, I said gently. She looked at me for a long moment. Then her eyes softened. You don't have to do anything, she said quietly. You've already been through enough. This isn't about obligation, I replied. Then what is it about? I met her gaze. It's about choice. The word hung in the air between us. I could walk away, I continued, pretend this was all something that belonged to him, something that ended when he did. Angela didn't respond. But I won't, I said. Her breath caught slightly. Why, she asked. I thought about it. About the notebook, about the years he had carried that weight, alone. Because I understand him now, I said softly. Not completely, but enough. Angela's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not sadness, not tension. Something closer to relief. You don't have to carry what he carried, she said. I know, I replied, but that doesn't mean I ignore it. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. I'm not trying to replace anything I added. Not for you, not for Ethan, and not for him. Angela nodded slowly. I know. I hesitated, then continued. I don't think he would want this to end with distance. Angela looked down briefly. No, she said quietly. He wouldn't. I took another breath. So I'm asking, I said, not demanding, not assuming, just asking. She looked back up. What are you asking? That we don't disappear from each other's lives, I said. The words felt strange, new, but right. Angela's expression shifted, emotions moving across her face too quickly to name. "That's a big step," she said. "I know," I replied, "and I'm not expecting anything overnight." I glanced toward the hallway where Ethan had gone. "I just don't think it's right for him to lose someone else who showed up," I said. Angela followed my gaze. Her eyes softened again. "He's already lost enough," she said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. Another silence. Then Angela let out a slow breath. "I don't know what that looks like," she admitted. "Neither do I said. "But we can figure it out." She studied me for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said. Just one word, but it carried so much more. Not a promise, not a solution, but a beginning. A few minutes later, Ethan came back into the room. He stopped when he saw us sitting there, still talking, still calm. Something in his expression shifted, less cautious, more curious. "Do you want a cookie?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "A cookie?" He nodded. "My mom made some this morning." I looked at Angela. She gave a small, almost surprised smile. Then I looked back at him. "I'd like that," I said. He smiled just a little and went to the kitchen. And as I sat there watching him move with that quiet confidence of a child who was starting to feel safe again, I realized something. This wasn't about fixing the past. It wasn't about balancing something that couldn't be balanced. It was about what came next. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt like that future might actually hold something good. A week later, I stood in front of Robert's grave again. The air was quiet. The sky stretched wide above me in that endless, indifferent way it always had. The cemetery looked the same as the day we buried him, rows of headstones, carefully trimmed grass, a stillness that made every thought feel louder. But I wasn't the same woman who had stood here before. Not anymore. I held a small bouquet of white lilies in my hands, his favorite. He used to say they were simple but honest, that they didn't try too hard to be beautiful. I knelt down, slowly placing them at the base of the stone. "Hi," I said softly. It felt strange, talking to someone who couldn't answer, but at the same time, it felt necessary. "I've been busy," I continued, a faint smile touching my lips. "You always said I didn't know how to sit still." I guess you were right. The wind stirred lightly, brushing against my face. For a moment, I just stayed there, letting the silence settle around me. Then I took a slow breath. "I know," I said quietly. "I know everything now." The words didn't feel as heavy as they had a few days ago. They still carried weight, but not anger, not like before. "I wish you had told me," I admitted. "I wish you had trusted me enough to let me carry some of it with you." My voice wavered slightly, but I didn't stop. "I would have," I added. "You know I would have." A tear slipped down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. Because this time it didn't feel like it was breaking me. It felt like something leaving, something I didn't need to hold on to anymore. I was so angry I continued. "When I found out, I thought you had betrayed me." The word hung in the air, heavy, but no longer sharp. "And maybe in some ways you did," I said honestly. "Not because of what you did, but because you didn't let me be part of it." I exhaled slowly. "But I understand now," I said. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves nearby. "You weren't trying to live a double life," I continued. "You were trying to live with something you didn't know how to share." I let that sit for a moment, because it was the truth, simple, complicated, and human. "I saw your notebook," I said softly. "You should know that." A small, sad smile crossed my face. "You always did write things down better than you said them out loud." I looked at his name etched into the stone. Robert Coleman. A man I had loved for decades. A man I was still learning about, even now. "You thought you weren't a good man," I said quietly. "That you couldn't fix what happened." I shook my head slightly. "You were wrong," I added, "because he was. He hadn't fixed it. He couldn't. But that didn't mean he hadn't tried, and that mattered more than I had ever realized before. I met Angela again," I said. The name felt different now, less like a threat, more like a connection. She's stronger than I expected, I continued. And Ethan? He's a good kid. I smiled faintly. You would have liked that, I said, knowing he's doing okay. I reached out, resting my hand lightly against the cool surface of the headstone. I'm going to stay in their lives, I said. The decision felt solid, steady, not rushed, not forced. I'm not doing it for you, I added softly. I'm doing it because it feels right. That was the truth. It wasn't about continuing his guilt. It wasn't about finishing something he had started. It was about choosing something new, something different, something that didn't come from pain, but from understanding. I think you would have been proud of that, I said. And for the first time since all of this began, I meant it. I stayed there for a while longer, just talking about small things, about memories, about the life we had shared, the good parts, the complicated parts, all of it. Because now it didn't feel like I had to separate them. They could exist together, side by side, just like they always had. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from my knees. I'm going to be okay, I said. The words felt strange, but true. I don't know what that looks like yet, I admitted, but I think I'm getting there. The wind moved through the trees again, soft and steady, and for a moment it felt like an answer. I gave the headstone one last look. Then I turned and walked away, not running, not escaping, just moving forward. That evening, the house felt warmer, not because anything had changed physically, but because something inside me had. Sophie ran into the living room, her laughter filling the space as she chased her stuffed bear across the floor. Michael stood in the kitchen talking quietly with Rachel, both of them more relaxed than they had been in days. And me, I stood in the middle of it all, watching, feeling, present. Grandma Sophie called. Come play with me, I smiled. I'm coming, I said. And as I walked toward her, toward my family, I realized something. The story I thought had ended at a funeral wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning, not of something perfect, but of something real, something honest, something that made room for both love and the complicated truths that come with it. And maybe that was enough. Sometimes the truth doesn't come in the form we expect. We think betrayal looks obvious, clear lines between right and wrong, loyalty and deception. But real life is rarely that simple. Sometimes, what feels like betrayal is actually silence, born from fear. Sometimes, what looks like distance is really someone trying to protect the people they love, even if they do it the wrong way. Danielle's story reminds us that people can carry invisible burdens for years. Guilt, regret, responsibility. These things don't always show on the surface, and when they're hidden, they don't disappear. They grow quietly, shaping choices, relationships, and entire lives. But this story is not just about secrets. It's about understanding. It's about choosing to look deeper instead of judging too quickly. And most importantly, it's about forgiveness, not because someone was perfect, but because they were human. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It doesn't make the pain disappear. But it gives us the power to move forward without carrying the weight of anger forever. So now I want to ask you, if you were in Danielle's place, would you forgive, would you feel betrayed, or would you try to understand? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters more than you think. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe, because sometimes the stories we need the most are the ones that help us see life a little differently.